Hello, you're watching the Daily Report. It's Wednesday, April 6th here in Korea. As always, we begin with the pandemic tallies over the past 24 hours here and abroad. So do start us off then.
Sunny, it is Wednesday, and Wednesday in terms of COVID-19 figures usually means a hike. But this Wednesday, we're not seeing a dramatic increase in infections from the day before. 286,294 cases were tallied as of 12 a.m. And that marks the first time in 5 weeks that a Wednesday figure has dropped to the 200,000 level. And also, as you can see, it's not much of a difference from the day before, and also compared to last Wednesday, it marks quite an on-week plunge, and that by around 138,000 cases. And let's also take a look at our map. Again, around half of the nation's cases have occurred in the metropolitan region, which accounted for around 144,000 cases this Wednesday, which means the rest of the half of the cases outside the capital region. And if we go over to our total number of cases here, 14.5 million, and Korea's death toll has surpassed 18,000 with 371 additional deaths reported in the past day. And also the daily average number of fatalities these days stands at around 300 in the past week. Now let's move over to the number of patients that remain in severe or critical condition due to this virus. 1,128 as of 12 a.m. this Wednesday, so not a big change from the day before. Onto our vaccination figures, a slight rise in the percentage of people who received their first COVID-19 vaccine dose. 87.7% and 86.7% have received their second one or are considered fully vaccinated. Meanwhile, 64% of the nation's population have received an additional or booster shot. Globally, there's been a rise by around 1.36 million infections in the past day, with 4,367 new deaths added in the past 24 hours as of noon, Korea time. And those are the general updates I have for now, but I'll see you back in a bit. Sunny?
All right, so thank you for those tallies. Now, authorities here have been taking subtle but steady steps into a new normal over time as they seek to usher in an endemic phase of COVID-19. For more, Yoon joins me now. Yoon, good to see you again.
Thanks for having me, Sunny.
Right then, let's begin with efforts that have been made thus far, Yoon, to manage COVID-19 more like the common flu then.
Right, so from last November, most people infected with COVID-19 have been asked to recover from home. And recently, authorities have allowed anyone to receive in-person treatment for COVID at local hospitals if they want to. Now, they're looking to expand the number of hospitals that provide medical services for COVID patients. Currently, there are some 4,800 outpatient treatment centers in the country. Take a listen to what the Minister of Interior and Safety had to say.
We will continue expanding the number of outpatient treatment centres for COVID-19 at local hospitals and clinics, providing in-person treatments. We will also kick off outreach treatment programmes where medical staff visit high-risk facilities like nursing homes themselves.
Authorities could also shut down residential treatment centers, which had been set up in the early days of the pandemic to treat COVID-19 patients with mild symptoms. With home treatment now becoming the norm, except for those without shelter, residential treatment centers are being little used. As of now, only 19% of all beds at residential treatment centers are occupied, and health authorities believe medical resources allocated here could be better used elsewhere.
Right, and that of course makes sense. Now, for COVID-19 patients at home, Yoon, I understand they can now venture outdoors to pick up their medication.
That's right. Authorities on Wednesday have decided to allow those infected with COVID-19 and recovering from home to pick up their own medication at pharmacies. This as many home recovery patients have found it inconvenient to have an uninfected family member or friend go and get it for them. Now, this was especially problematic for those living alone without anyone to visit a pharmacy on their behalf. Health authorities have provided new guidelines for home recovery patients to make a run to the pharmacy without putting others in danger.
We ask those infected to stand outside the pharmacy and stand 1 meter apart from each other when waiting for their medication. We will also create storage areas where people can pick up their medication with minimum contact. We kindly ask everyone to refrain from talking to others and for pharmacies to abide by all prevention measures.
And the government has promised incentives to pharmacies that provide in-person prescription to those infected. What these incentives are, we don't know yet.
Meanwhile, on the treatment front, Yoon, as Soa mentioned back on Tuesday, we're expecting antiviral pills to a greater number of patients in the country then.
That's right. Now that the government has secured enough supplies of oral treatments, they're making these antiviral pills more accessible. Some 420,000 courses are available for use this month. From today, residents at nursing homes and mental health centers where many infections have occurred recently can receive antiviral pills from public health centers. Authorities have supplied public health centers nationwide with enough antiviral pills to immediately supply other medical facilities and nursing centers in need. Each public health center will receive antiviral pills from Paaks that's enough to treat 100 people, and from Ligevrio enough to treat 24 people. Now, these centers can also request more supplies if needed.
I see. All right, Yoon, thank you for now, but do stay behind for more talks. Up next, Soa is back at the desk, I understand, with the government's green light for an expansion of overseas flights, Soa.
Right, Sunny. Following the peak of the Omicron wave, the government expects more Korean citizens to fly abroad. And to meet those demands, authorities decided to let airliners increase their flight operations starting next month as part of its gradual shift in prevention guidelines. The plan is to first add 100 more flights per week in the next couple of months. Then starting July, it'll be 300 additional flights a week. A stage-by-stage expansion will not only be applied to South Korea's main international airport in Incheon, but also at other airports with international routes like in Gimpo, Cheongju, and Jeju Island. With that, the government hopes that by the end of this year, international flights will be at around half of the level the country enjoyed before the pandemic broke out. Individuals, however, will have to make some considerations before traveling.
For those looking to travel abroad, you need to find out what the entry requirements are at your country of destination and what protocols are in place in case you're infected when planning your trip.
Right, and so I suppose those people might also want to consider about the potential threat of new variants in other countries, right?
Right, Sunny. So the situation is really different depending on where you are and on which country you want to travel to. In some countries, the Omicron wave continues, and then currently the stealth Omicron variant or the BA2 variant is the dominant strain in many countries. Meanwhile, we also hear of the XE and XJ variants. Now, this one might be a little unfamiliar to many people. The XJ variant has been reported in Thailand this week. Now, following reports of the so-called XE variant, a recombinant of the BA1 and BA2 Omicron variants, another combination referred to as the XJ variant is being suspected, not confirmed yet, in a delivery worker in Thailand, according to health authorities there. It's based on a genome test from February. Now, XJ has a different genetic makeup from the XE variant that has been mentioned more frequently lately, for instance, in the UK. Now, the XJ was reportedly first detected in Finland, and there is little known about the transmissibility yet. Thailand is actually one of the locations to where flights from Korea are expected to rise, along with Singapore, the US, and European countries.
Right, and in the Chinese city of Shanghai, so I understand there's been a shift in containment strategy with regard to the separation of young COVID-19 patients from their legal guardians, right?
Right, Sunny. I briefly mentioned this issue at the beginning of the week. There was international outrage when images or footages went viral of babies being isolated from their parents at hospitals in Shanghai, even in cases where their parents were also infected with COVID-19. Now, the city has eased its policy on separating infected children from their parents, according to local reports. Some families who abide by strict prevention requirements are permitted to stay with their children at a temporary hospital. This also goes for parents who tested negative with an infected child who is 7 years old or younger. Shanghai, meanwhile, accounts for roughly 80% of infections in China. The country reported a record high of more than 20,000 cases for the first time on Wednesday, breaking its earlier record of around 16,000 just the day before.
Right, so let's include Yoon in our talk now. Yoon, here in the country, officials are looking to reportedly stave off another potential wave of COVID-19 by boosting public vaccination protection.
That's right, Sunny. As I said yesterday, authorities are looking to secure millions more COVID-19 vaccines ahead of the fall and winter season when there could be a rebound in infections due to the drop in temperatures. That's why authorities are considering the rollout of fourth doses to a broader segment of the population. Authorities have reiterated the importance of frequent vaccinations, especially because of their waning protection over time. Currently in Korea, fourth doses, or second boosters, if you'd like to call them, are being given to those with weak immunity, seniors age 60 and up, and people at high-risk venues like nursing homes.
Right, and so I understand we have more study results with regard to the effects of fourth Pfizer doses.
Right, and those findings could impact Korea's decision on whether to expand the fourth shots to the more general public, and also the decision that's also being considered in countries like the U.S., where a heated debate is going on whether to let more people that is benefit from a second booster shot. Now, Israel conducted a study, a new one, on the efficacy of second boosters, and there is some good but also slightly disappointing news. A fourth shot of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine did provide additional protection against Omicron infections as well as serious symptoms among seniors aged 60 and above. But the duration of the vaccine protection did not last long. The booster's effectiveness waned after just 4 weeks and almost vanished after 8 weeks. So let me read out what researchers' assessment of this latest study was. For confirmed infection, a fourth dose appeared to provide only short-term protection and a modest absolute benefit. And I purposely did not paraphrase this because this can be a sensitive issue.
Right, so we will probably have to wait and see whether these shots will be provided to the general public or not. But considering the limited shelf life of COVID-19 vaccines, authorities will need to get the timing right when it comes to bringing new shipments in. For instance, other countries that have already pressed ahead in giving out both fourth jabs to the elderly and others at high risk are Israel. Israel was the first nation to make fourth jabs available in December of 2021, and it's actually open to those aged 60 or older. In Hungary, anyone can get a fourth dose after consulting with the doctor and requesting for one.
I see. All right, Ian, thank you for those updates. So thank you as well, and see you on Thursday.
See you on Thursday.
Topping our headlines on this Wednesday afternoon is the latest with regard to bilateral talks between President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol's delegation and U.S. officials at the White House on Tuesday. The delegation also conveyed a letter from Mr. Yoon to his U.S. counterpart. Our Kim Hyo-sun has more.
South Korean President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol's delegation to Washington has delivered a personal letter from Yoon for U.S. President Joe Biden. Representative Paaks of the People Power Party, who's leading the team, said they handed the letter over Tuesday during their talks at the White House with U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan. The two sides also discussed the need to hold a bilateral summit at an early date. But according to Park, no potential dates were mentioned. During the 40-minute-long meeting, they also touched upon the possible deployment of more U.S. strategic assets to South Korea. The lawmakers said this is an important part of Yoon's plan to strengthen Seoul's extended deterrence. In addition, Park said the letter includes Yoon's commitment to strengthen the South Korea-U.S. alliance so they can better respond to new challenges, including North Korea's nuclear threats and economic risks. North Korea policies were also discussed, with Seoul and Washington sharing the view that the regime's nuclear and missile activities pose a grave threat to the Korean peninsula and beyond. They also talked about ways to work together on other regional and global issues, namely climate change and solving supply chain disruptions. The delegation also met on Tuesday with the chairman of the U.S. House Foreign Affairs Subcommittee on Asia to highlight the importance of bolstering the alliance. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
In Eastern Europe, the plight of people in the southeastern Ukrainian city of Mariupol continues. The city mayor claims thousands remain trapped without access to basic necessities, as 90% of the city's infrastructure has been reduced to rubble. Errands reports.
Humanitarian issues have reached crisis point in Ukraine since Russia's invasion on February 24th. 90% of the Ukrainian southeast port city of Mariupol has reportedly been destroyed after being besieged by the Russian military. The city's mayor said on Monday in a press conference that 90% of the city's infrastructure is destroyed, while 40% is unrecoverable. He added that around 130,000 people remain trapped in the city without fuel and water, and the Ukrainian government is currently planning to evacuate the remaining residents. Meanwhile, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said on Tuesday in a press conference ahead of Wednesday's NATO foreign ministers gathering in Brussels that Russia is likely to launch a new offensive in Ukraine's eastern Donbas region in the next several weeks.
We now see a significant movement of troops away from Kiev to regroup, rearm, and resupply, and they shift their focus to the east. In the coming weeks, we expect a further Russian push in the eastern and southern Ukraine to try to take the entire Donbas and to create a land bridge to occupied Crimea.
The Secretary General also highlighted the importance of NATO allies providing further support to Ukraine, including anti-tank weapons, air defense systems, and other equipment. Meanwhile, at Tuesday's UN Security Council meeting, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky urged the UN to take action against Russia, adding that Russian troops must be held accountable for war crimes and atrocities in Bucha and other cities in Ukraine.
Now the world can see what the Russian military did in Bucha while keeping the city under their occupation, but the world has yet to see what they have done in other occupied cities and regions of our country.
Showing the Security Council graphic footage of dead Ukrainians, the Ukrainian leader called for permanent member Russia to be removed from the council, or alternately that the group be dissolved and reformed entirely. China's response after seeing the disturbing images from Bucha and other cities in Ukraine was that the council should focus on verifying and establishing facts. China's ambassador to the UN said that dialogue and negotiations are the only route to peace and called on the US, NATO, and the EU to engage in comprehensive dialogue with Russia. However, he added that humanitarian aid is necessary for Ukraine and promised to provide continuous assistance for the country. Lee-hyun, Arirang News.
In other news, Asia's Regional Development Bank believes consumer costs will surpass economic expansion here in Korea this year. Our Oh Soo-young has more on these prospects.
Inflation in South Korea is expected to outpace the country's economic growth rate this year. The Asia Development Bank's growth outlook on Tuesday projects price levels in the country will rise by 3.2% in 2022. But its gross domestic product is expected to grow by 3%. While South Korea is expected to see consumption recover and its export volume increase, the bank made a 0.1 cut to its previous GDP estimate, citing the rapid spread of Omicron and the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. These factors are set to add upward pressure to consumer prices, which are likely to stay above 4% after reaching that level in March for the first time in over a decade. As the war in Ukraine hits global food and energy supplies, the Asia Development Bank has cut the overall GDP estimate for 46 Asian economies to 5.2%, while raising inflation to 3.7%. Other risks to the region's recovery include the United States' expected monetary tightening policy, which in the past has triggered a massive capital flight from emerging capital markets, as well as currency depreciation. However, the bank expects the region to stay on the path of economic recovery from the pandemic as domestic demand picks up across Asian countries. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, in the US, there's been a slight decline in the country's trade deficit, but the gap remains near the record high noted back in January. Our Kim Sung-min explains.
The U.S. trade deficit in February once again stayed near its record high. According to the Commerce Department on Tuesday, the goods and service trade deficit for the world's largest economy came to $89.2 billion in February, down just 0.1% from the historic high recorded the month before. This as both exports and imports shot up to a record high. In the month of February, imports of goods and services surged 1.3% to a record of almost $318 billion, whereas exports climbed 1.8% to around $229 billion. What largely pushed up the overall import figure was services imports, which rose more than $2 billion to a record of $51.6 billion. About half of the increase came from the biggest monthly increase in charges for use of intellectual property since 2016, which according to Bloomberg includes things like the rights fees to broadcast the Winter Olympics. The increase in goods imports follows a surge in industrial materials such as crude oil and chemicals. In terms of exports, increase in travel as well as petroleum shipments drove the surge, but a decrease in capital goods partly offset those increases. Looking ahead, Russia's invasion of Ukraine could further put a damper on U.S. export growth while sending commodity prices even higher. Those higher commodity prices are also likely to lead to higher inflation. To tame that inflation, the Fed is preparing for rapid rate hikes, which will come as early as next month. The U.S. Central Bank raised its interest rate in March by 25 basis points to 0.5%, the first hike in more than 3 years. U.S. Federal Reserve Governor Lael Brainerd said on Tuesday that she expects a combination of an interest rate raise and a balance sheet runoff. She added that further tightening could follow as needed later this year. Kim Sung-min, Arirang News.
As part of broader efforts to offer the differently abled a chance to work and to partake in the community, one local startup is offering tranquil taxi rides amid the hustle and bustle of city life. Our Song Yoo-jin has the story.
It's been over 2 years since Lee Hyung-soo started working as a taxi driver. But not long before that, Lee couldn't have imagined himself driving a taxi. For deaf people like him, finding a job in the service industry where communication is crucial has not been easy. Then in 2018, a startup company launched a taxi service linking the deaf to taxi companies. 2 years later, the service transformed to a ride-hailing platform called 고요하nem.
We started 고요하nem hoping to offer higher wages and more job opportunities to the disabled, particularly the deaf. So far, we have created 115 jobs, with 41 drivers currently operating 23 taxis.
And I had the chance to ride one of these special taxis.
Passengers who want to take this taxi can call the driver by entering where they will get on and off using this application called 고요하nem.
The app then matches a nearby driver. Thanks to a tablet PC attached behind the passenger seat, communicating with the driver is not a problem. Passengers record what they want to say, then the recording is sent to the driver's tablet PC.
조금만 천천히 가주세요.
The driver can also reply through his own device.
This tablet PC not only allows passengers to communicate with the driver, but also teaches basic sign language, like thank you and you're such a great driver.
All of the platform's taxis are SUVs to give drivers a clear view of the road while offering passengers a spacious and comfortable ride. The company is now working towards a bigger goal.
We are looking to enhance mobility for the disabled. For one, we have brought over a wheelchair-friendly taxi from the UK. Our ultimate goal is to provide a mobility service that is open to all drivers and passengers with or without a disability.
Lee hopes 고요하nem and similar services will keep improving opportunities for the disabled.
특히나 이제 저 같은 농아인분들은 일자리를 구하기가 많이 어렵습니다. 그래서 일자리가 앞으로 확대되었으면 좋겠고, 특히나 이제 농아인이긴 하지만 승객들에게 친절하게 서비스를 제공해드리고 싶습니다.
That service, along with privacy and comfort, is why more people are turning to these quiet taxis. 송유진, 아리랑 뉴스.
errand service applications are gaining popularity here on the local front as COVID-19 patients in quarantine seek ways to access medication and other basic necessities, including food. Do take a look.
Mr. Kang Sok, who is working as a so-called helper for an errand running service application, received a customer's order to deliver medicine from a pharmacy.
굉장히 많이 증가했죠. 주로 이제 자가격리돼서 이제 밖으로 못 나오신 분들이 굉장히 많고요. 그리고 뭐 혼자 사셔서 이제 많이 좀 이제 나가기에 불편을 겪으신 분들도 더러 계시더라고요.
On the back of soaring COVID-19 cases, more and more people in quarantine opt for this errand service application. This in particular holds true for single-person households or in the case of entire family has tested positive. The app virtually becomes the sole supplier of daily necessities. A number of errand apps now boast more than 100,000 downloads. Sales in the past month alone have surged 20 to 100% from the previous month.
매출은 지난달 대비 이번 달이 한 2배 정도 상승을 했습니다. 아무래도 이제 코로나가 장기화되고 또 최근에 오미크론까지 또 발생을 하면서 약간 이제는 약 배달이 좀 일상이 되어가는 느낌?
현재까지 약 2만 건에 가까운 심부름이 등록되었고 그중 이제 일반 의약품 구매 대행 및 이제 비대면 진료약품 대리 수령의 경우에는 전체 심부름에서 현재 약 56%의 비율을 차지하고 있습니다.
Unlike the usual errand service centers that assign professional errand runners, the unique feature of the errand service application is that it connects customers with ordinary residents in their area. So today, I'd like to get a self-test kit for COVID-19 delivered through this application.
So you want to know how the errand running service app works? Once customers turn on the app, they type in what kind of errand they need and propose a fee. Usually, one errand costs around $3 and customers can also select the helper's gender and age. Then, based on that information, errand runners are good to go for their mission.
I received this self-test kit for COVID-19 in a few minutes after ordering it through the application. I think the biggest advantage of using this service is that we can save both time and cost.
In 2020, when COVID-19 also broke out here in Korea, the government temporarily allowed non-contact diagnosis and treatment in order to prevent a further spread of the virus. In the early days, most non-face-to-face medical treatment was done by phone for patients with underlying medical conditions. But recently, the use of mobile applications by the general public has increased dramatically. In fact, one specific non-contact medical treatment service application experienced a 2.5-time increase in diagnosis appointments in February compared to the previous month. And as demand increased, supply also increased, resulting in about 20 apps that adopted similar services. The increase of a remote medical practice may help revitalize the medical industry, but what also have to be considered is the conflict involving around different interests of stakeholders in the medical field. However, there's no specific medical law handling these issues.
의료 행위 자체가 세상이 빨리 변하고 있죠. 빨리 변하고 있는데 법 자체가 그 세상의 변화를 크게 따라가지 못하는 부분이 있습니다. 의료법이나 약사법의 경우에 이러한 입법에 딜레이되는 문제 혹은 입법에 불비가 생길 경우에는 그러니까 일반 시민들의 건강과 직결되기 때문에 보다 입법기관에 좀 귀 깊은 관찰과 이 변화를 발맞춰 가려는 입법 노력이 필요하다고 보입니다.
The errand application market is expected to thrive on the back of the continuously changing COVID-19 situation, which calls for an expansion of medical capacity as well as non-contact diagnosis and delivery of medicines. This has been Jessica Lee.
BTS became the first Korean band to perform live at the 64th Grammy Awards ceremony over in Las Vegas this past Sunday. For more on K Entertainment, I have music critic Kim Young-dae live on the line. It's been a while, Young-dae. Welcome back.
Good afternoon, Sunny.
I also have movie critic that would be Pierce Conran joining this session virtually as well. Pierce, it's good to have you on.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Right, Young-dae, I'll start with you. Now, there's a strong sense of déjà vu about this first question I'm going to ask you. I remember talking about BTS being overlooked, so to speak, for a Grammy last year. And it appears to be the same story this year, according to ARMY. What are your thoughts?
Well, overlooked, snubs, you can talk about it all day. But for me personally, I always believe that there are many, many reasons that you can, consider about, someone won the award. But I just cannot pinpoint any specific reason for not winning the award. But at least you can talk about, some of the background, some of the nature of each major awards, so that you might get some sense of why certain musicians not winning the award. In this case, BTS. Well, Billboard Music Award, they are based on the data and the chart data collected by the Billboard. And American Music Award now is a completely fan-voted award. So for those awards, you can definitely have more straightforward, the reason and then backgrounds for the result. But unlike the two major awards, Grammy, probably the most prestigious one, they're completely based on the votes from the committee, the Recording Academy. But unfortunately, we don't know who they are. We don't know why they made a certain decision on what the standard. We just can guess. So personally, as a music critic, I just can guess the backgrounds and the kind of Grammy taste, but it's not completely a logical one. It's not based on a logical like choice. For me, Grammy's been always less, they're less open-minded for the male young pop idols or boy band. They always made some safe choices, and this year not an exception. And also the category, the pop duo or group, that's been a new category since 2012, as far as I know, in which the two different categories, the duo and the band, the group, have been merging into one. So for the last a decade, I think usually the award went to the duo rather than bands, because right at this point, these days, duo is not a traditional duo. It's more like one musicians, collaborating with the other. So it has definitely an advantage in that sense. So probably that's some guesses I can make.
Right. And Young-dae, viewership for Sunday's show was little changed from last year's all-time low. How do you explain this low ratings? Do you suppose it's a reflection perhaps of the public's retreating confidence, so to speak, in the awards itself?
Well, the award show is generally boring, honestly. I don't have a big data or detail the documents that I have right now, so I can't tell exactly why. But obviously, I think so far for the last few years, BTS really helped the ratings. But still, the award show in general, in the bigger picture, the ratings are dropping fast every year for the last decade, because nowadays you can watch the show, streaming online. You can watch the show differently. Well, it's not traditional broadcasting, but you can talk about the show and watch the show with your peer on the social media platform. So definitely this 3 hours, 4 hours TV show, I can definitely understand why the ratings are dropping fast.
Oh, I see. And we'll get back to that soon. But then again, meanwhile, on the small screen peers, that start with Apple TV Plus's Pachinko, which follows the poignant tale of a family over 4 generations from Korea to Japan to the US. What, Pierce, has been the international response to this drama series?
Oh, it's been overwhelmingly positive. The first wave of reviews that came out a few weeks ago, when some critics were able to preview the whole series, were just unanimous raves, were very, very strong. And that trickle has kind of continued up until it was released. And it's just been doing extremely well. It's probably the most well-reviewed thing that's appeared on Apple TV Plus, which is still kind of a new service. And the response is so strong that we can kind of, since we've already been talking about awards, in the TV world, the big awards are the Emmys, and you kind of feel like Pachinko is already kind of gearing up for a big presence at the Emmys, the TV's Academy Awards, if you will, which will be later this year. So it's been extremely well received. And now that it's opened in Korea, you have the response was from foreign critics, and of course local viewers are probably just curious to see what is this Pachinko, you know, why are these foreign critics kind of raving about it? And you know, it's happened before that we've had stories, Korean American stories, namely this is not a Korean American story, but it's made by Korean American creators, and these namely things like Minari a few years ago, which was also very well received. And of course, Yoon Jung, who also appears in Pachinko, got her Academy Award, which was massive, massive news here. And while the film was respected on release here, I don't think it was extremely loved by a local audience. And I think that's is the same for a lot of Korean American stories that have been kind of, you know, met with muted respect rather than adoration. But Pachinko has really kind of broken through in a big way. I think part of that is that it is, of course, a very glossy show. It's very expensive. Reportedly, it costs, you know, somewhere close to $100 million, which is, you know, much more than a K-drama would cost, of course. You have stars that are beloved, that are award-winning, like Yoon Jung, and that are just beloved around the world, like Lee Min-ho. You have new faces that are very exciting, like Kim Mina. And then just the themes, I think, have really been interesting, because I think local viewers have been really fascinated by this sort of, I guess, again, the Korean American view of Koreanness, which is, you know, it's kind of an outsider perspective, but it's also an insider perspective. And I've spoken to a lot of people who've been really impressed about how the show really captured Koreanness in a way that they felt was genuine, and that they felt themselves that as a Korean person would have been difficult to articulate themselves. So it's been really successful on a lot of fronts. And if I may add one small part, I think compared to other stories made by Korean Americans, the you know, treatment of kind of the like the history, the colonial history, and sort of it stokes a little bit of, you know, anti-Japanese sentiment, which has of course been very popular at the box office over the years. Films like Roaring Currents, the most successful film of all time, or The Age of Shadows or Assassination, that's been popular with local audiences as well. So it's all kind of come together in this show.
Right, and staying with screen productions, Piers, pundits say that global interest in Korean dramas has perhaps moved beyond that of greasy plot lines to include even mellow romantic stories. What do you suppose are the implications of this global appetite for diverse Korean content?
Well, it's really just been amazing kind of watching it happen. Although I would say with the mellow stories, that's kind of where the, you know, the start of K-drama is. It was always romantic dramas, which were, you know, cheaper to produce than things that would be made as films. And K-dramas have been successful around the world for many years, and those were largely K-dramas, also period dramas. And then it was really, you had kind of the rise of some sophisticated thrillers, things like Signal and Stranger, which kind of, you know, got a new group of fans, and kind of more respect for the the small screen industry in Korea. And then later Netflix comes in, you have Kingdom, of course, and then Squid Game, and now you just have everything. You have The Silent Sea as a sci-fi, you have legal dramas like Juvenile Justice earlier this year, you have more zombie things like All of Us Are Dead, you have dystopian horror like Hellbound. And at this point, viewers around the world are so accepting that Korean content can kind of encompass kind of any sort of genre, that they're frequently surprised and delighted by what they see, that I think they're just really excited to see what the Korean content industry will surprise them with next.
Right. Now, Youngdae, back in Sin City, some say the Grammys this year was an opportunity to truly indulge in Hallyu. Would you agree?
I do. Yeah, I do. Well, I forgot to say about the performance. It was excellent. I mean, the fantastic BTS, you know, doing the kind of James Bond thing, and the jacket, you know, choreography, which was perfect. But on the top of what I already mentioned, and what Piers mentioned about this diversity of, you know, embraced by the American public, I always see some patterns in this, you know, Korean K-culture going mainstream. You know, initially there was some exceptional, stars, right? Directors, stars, K-pop star. Then there will be some diverse interest on diverse genres. Then lastly, among them, there will be more diverse taste and preference. So now I think the K-culture, K-pop and K-movies overall is in that last phase. So that's what I will call the mainstreaming of K-culture. What I think the most important thing about this is that K-culture in general was accepted not as some exotic, peculiar one, a modern, hip, or a cosmopolitan one, and that's some significant difference, from the past, to the past, the rise of Japanese culture and Chinese culture. Well, Westerners usually they respect the Asian culture, traditional one especially, but now they're embracing K-culture as not just kind of like a traditional one, but a contemporary culture. And that's probably the most important and the thing and difference, K-culture being the kind of global standard representing the contemporariness.
Right. And beyond K-contents, Young, the R&D duo Silk Sonic swept the Grammy Awards this year, winning all 4 categories that it was nominated for. I mean, members Anderson .Paak and Bruno Mars took home the Best R&B Performance, the Best R&B Song, Song of the Year, and Record of the Year. Now, I hear Anderson .Paak has a special connection to Korea. Could you tell us a bit more about this?
Yeah, Paak or Paak, depending on the context, but he's among probably one of the most important R&B singers and the most critically acclaimed musicians right now. Oh, I don't exactly know the detailed background, but he's a mixed African-American father and a Korean mother. So he definitely had the 2 different heritage. So, well, Anderson's mother was born in South Korea and during the Korean War, and Anderson also married to Korean wife, so he's definitely the member of the bigger, Korean family. So during the lots of interview, he, constantly showed his respect and love for Korea and about his Korean heritage. He's definitely proud of. So yeah, well, in a bigger picture, he's not considered as K-pop musicians, but it's definitely a success of the bigger the diasporic Korean musicians and Korean art.
Right, very talented, of course. Now, Pierce, back on Pachinko. Now, one journalist said that, and I quote, behind the ambitious adaptation of Min Jin Lee's novel, Pachinko, of course, are 20 historical consultants, 4 executive producers, 2 directors, and more than 600 cast members, 95% of whom are Asian. Pierce, do you see this reality as tangible indication, perhaps, of the growing diversity, perhaps, within the American television industry?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we've been seeing this happen for a few years, and where, 10 years ago, a story that would have been largely Asian American, financed by Hollywood, would have been something very, very small that likely wouldn't have gotten a huge amount of exposure, even if it was, acclaimed or well-respected within its framework. But now that's gotten bigger and bigger. We had things like the Farewell, Crazy Rich Asians, of course, a few years ago, and the level of sophistication and ambition has just grown and grown. And Pachinko, of course, is this wonderful, wonderful novel that started off a bidding war, and Apple won that. And Apple has been, I think, is trying to kind of get ahead of the curve on sort of like a representation. I know one of the producers on Pachinko, her name is Teresa Gang. She used to be an agent in Hollywood, and now is a big producer. And she's her big thing is representation, and so she's leading by example with something like Pachinko. And I think it's great. And we have these directors, particularly Justin Chon and Kobanada, who've both made some really interesting independent films. They both had films at the Cannes Film Festival last year, though they weren't in the big international competition. But they've made indie movies, and they were plucked from kind of acclaimed the acclaimed indie field because they obviously Apple and the creators of Pachinko felt that their themes reflected those of Pachinko. And now, of course, now that the show has done so well, they will likely go on to do some very interesting things in Hollywood. And I expect pretty much anyone involved with Pachinko is going to have some interesting offers coming to them in the next year or two.
Right, hopefully that will be the case. Meanwhile, Youngdae, do tell us a bit about BTS's upcoming concert starting this coming Friday in Sin City.
You mean the city, right? Yeah.
Right.
I mean, for a lot of fans, ARMY is probably the bigger news than the Grammy. The hotel's fully booked. The strip area is going to be, filled with BTS-related, things like pop-up store, specially designed hotel rooms, Bellagio fountains. Well, it's a really rare case, probably the first case that Las Vegas is going to be filled with the K-pop, not just K-pop, one specific artist like BTS, the contents. Well, yeah, literally the city, BTS city. Well, it's another one of the many proofs that now they're becoming the best K-pop group, not just best K-pop group, but the world leading best band in the world. So yeah, I mean, it's fantastic, and it's one of the things that you never expected before.
Right. They are poised to have 4 concerts, Youngdae, I understand, this coming Friday and Saturday, and next Friday as well as Saturday. They've also asked concert goers, that is, to wear face masks. I'm assuming this was favorably accepted by their fans, the ARMY?
Oh, can you repeat that question?
The wearing of face masks at the concert.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't understand the question, actually.
Right, I was wondering, because I understand that BTS has asked their fans to come to the concerts wearing their face masks, which are a bit of a controversial issue over in the US. But I'm assuming that the ARMY has accepted this condition.
Yeah, I think so. Well, I'm not really aware of the situation, so I'm sorry about that. But yeah, I hope so.
No problem, Youngdae. I was just asking. Right, Pierce, by the way, which upcoming Korean films do you care to shed light on as we look ahead to the warmer months of the year?
Well, I'm glad you asked, and I'm glad to say that there are finally some films coming out. It's been a very, very long dry spell, and it's been very frustrating. And of course, we've had films scheduled and pulled from the schedules, yanked from the schedules continuously, naturally, because the pandemic has just been kind of lots of ups and downs. Now we are in this kind of very positive downturn. Hopefully it sticks to that. And some of these films that we've been waiting for a long time looks like they're going to be coming out very soon. So starting later this month, we'll start seeing some new commercial Korean films, mainstream films. Starting next month, we'll start seeing some of the heavy hitters. We have a sequel to The Outlaws called The Roundup, again with Ma Dong-seok, or Don Lee as he goes by in Hollywood, coming out next month. In June, we have another sequel, the second film, The Witch. The Witch 2 then is coming out in June. We have the Cannes Film Festival next month. We're expecting a number of Korean films to be invited there. We don't know the lineup yet. That'll probably be revealed next week. But we expect with a high degree of certainty that Broker, actually a film by the Japanese director Korida Hirokazu, but it stars Korean actors Song Kang-ho, IU, Bae-duna, lots and lots of other people. And we expect that to be in Cannes and then to come out shortly after that in Korea. Likewise, for Park Chan-wook's new film Decision to Leave with Tang Wei and Paak, also expected to be in Cannes and come out shortly after that. Beyond that, we have the big heavy hitters in summer. Choi Dong-hoon is back with a new film, actually a 2-part film, and the first one of those, just the first part of Alien, is probably going to come out this summer. We have Emergency Declaration, the big aviation disaster film that was at Cannes last year, that's still awaiting release, stars Song Kang-ho and Lee Byung-hun. Another Lee Byung-hun disaster film, Concrete Utopia, also tipped for release this summer. A sequel to Roaring Currents, also starring Paak, called Hansan Rise of the Dragon, also expected this summer. We'll see. We don't know just yet exactly what's going to come out, but it looks like it's going to be a very big summer. Fingers crossed it'll stay that way.
Lots to watch this summer then. Youngdae, Big Bang's comeback single, Still Life, reportedly broke multiple records within hours of its release. Could you tell us a bit about this?
Yeah, well, Big Bang was probably one of the biggest, before BTS, came to the scene. I think that their impact and the influence is still there. Well, locally in Korea, there are a lot of mixed opinions and reaction to the comeback of Big Bang for several reasons, like everyone knows. But internationally, I think that the impact and their kind of gravity is still bigger than most of the bands. I think that this is really interesting phenomenon because K-pop's been a global, has been becoming a global genre and started to be accepted differently by different people. I mean, different fans all over the world. So for some of the fans, I mean, some things really matter, but some things they don't believe that certain things are not really that important. So what for me the important thing is that the longevity. I mean, how they continue their career. I mean, throughout this whole globalization era, because in the past, traditionally, Western boy band, they usually have a shorter, span of a career and a shorter, peak time and, prime time, and they're, always coming back many years later as a reunion show. But K-pop group like Big Bang, as the second generation of a K-pop band, they keep, continuing their wonderful career and keep, coming back with the good material. So I think that's an important part for that comeback.
Right. Youngdae, are there any upcoming K-pop groups that you would ask us to keep an eye on?
Oh, Stray Kids.
Is that where Hyunjin is, Stray Kids?
Yeah.
My daughter's a huge fan. Stray Kids Maniac, yeah. That's what Still Life, was it, overtook, right? Yeah, they made a #1 US album already, and they're leading this like a fourth generation of K-pop boom. So the Stray Kids is definitely one of the groups that you have to watch. I see. All right, Youngdae, as always, thank you very much for that. Pierce, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts as well. Thanks so much. Right, well, on that note, we say goodbye. We'll be back with more coverage same time tomorrow. That will be Thursday. See you then. Thank you for now.
I'm a professional chef.